The brand new Marvel movie Morbius is now released in theaters and critics are hating it. Like always, what I do with these Rotten Tomato videos, I go ahead and look at all of the negative reviews that are posted on Rotten Tomatoes and see what they're talking about and wonder if I agree with them or disagree with them. This video is going to be a little bit short, mostly because the reviews have not been released in like a very long time, so the way that this video is going to be condensed is just really short. Also, once again, if you understand how these videos work, I don't actually read every single Rotten Tomatoes review because sometimes they would say the exact same thing and it's just me repeating the exact same thing over and over again, so sometimes I have to go ahead and move on towards a different one. Also, keep in mind, I'm recording ahead of time. Like right here, I have a different shirt and I'll be reacting to the negative reviews since I have seen the movie in a different shirt because I want to go ahead and get these videos out as soon as I possibly can, which pretty much explains why this video is done very awkwardly and why I have two different shirts on. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started looking at some of the negative reviews. This might have been a terrific movie if it was still 2015, but no one has asked for this kind of throwback to when comic book movies were just so mediocre and forgettable. Jared Leto's transformation makes for compelling viewing, but the living vampire can't elevate a disappointing story that serves as a powerful, dare we say terrifying, reminder Spider-Man is better off and safer in the MCU with Marvel Studios. This thing will suck the energy out of audiences faster than Morbius can drain a vial of artificial blood. Morbius is a mostly unlikable mess. The lowest bar any superhero movie has to clear is that it should at least be fun to watch. Morbius falls at the first hurdle. One of the worst popcorn blockbuster experiences in recent memory. So after watching the movie, yeah, I pretty much agree with how the critics think. I didn't think the movie was that good. It was a pretty bad film and one of the more forgettable Marvel movies. Sony does have this problem with how they advertise the films, and they think that you're giving you something that you are most likely interested in, but then they mess that up somehow, and now all of the other stuff that you have to deal with, you have to see if there's any type of potential there, but all of that other stuff is just as poorly executed. The worst thing about it is that it had the potential to go ahead and be something interesting, and it could have been a good movie, and for a movie that does have vampires in it, it could have been a fun film, but it was neither fun nor interesting. It's a pretty bad comic book film, and I would agree it does fit within that genre of 2000s films that were also bad comic book movies. Leto certainly broods up a storm behind his veil of rockstar hair, but the movie has too little to distinguish it from the second-tier Marvel pack, ending up as more of the same. There's some kind of invisible force here, hurrying things along in the hopes of a future team-up, making sure Morbius arrives more undead than alive. Morbius has such an anonymous feel to it that it's impossible to work up any strong feelings one way or another. There is no fun to be had here. There isn't any ironic or so bad it's good enjoyment. It's soulless, it's oozing, tar-like gunk that has been spit out of the Hollywood machine, and you should avoid stepping in it. I agree. I don't really know what's going on with Sony in these Marvel movies. It looks like that they just don't know what they're doing, and they kind of lose their identity while just creating these other films. Ironically enough, the way they create these action scenes and how they create their stories, they're oddly enough the same thing, except they have different reasons why they still don't work with what they're doing. But in the end, it still looks like that this film is trying to create more sequels and spin-offs of doing other things that people didn't really have an anticipation to do so. We didn't really ask for this, but yet it's something that the film is trying to get us to have. So I don't really see what they're doing here. If there is any justice in Hollywood, Morbius will be retconned to the margins of superhero cinema history, if the film doesn't bury the genre alive first, that is. The cinematic equivalent of Murphy's Law is demonstrated by this appalling superhero snooze fest. It's a movie without dramatic jeopardy, originality, narrative coherence, compelling characters, or even a single vaguely human performance. Suffering from the same problems of trying to be dark and violent, but still all ages that Venom did, Morbius lacks the staying power and charm of its predecessor due in large part to its lead. A bland, competent, and safe superhero adventure that seems destined to be forgotten before its end credits finish rolling. Without, say, someone like Tom Hardy embracing the weirdness of the character in Venom, it's tough to find rooting interest or muster any excitement for the vampiric Batman. Morbius has the potential of doing something else and becoming a fascinating movie, but yeah, kind of like Venom, it's being held back through any restrictions of what it could do to make an interesting movie, and instead is making this generic superhero film where now it's creating Morbius, not an anti-hero, but an actual superhero. I mean, give Venom credit, that character is sort of an anti-hero. Morbius is not really that. And to me, that's just nuts. Now, for the performances, they were the most salvageable thing, for me at least, in the whole entire movie. It's the screenplay that's terrible. So I can't really complain the actors for doing so. However, I do think there were moments where Leto was feeling stiff and wooden a couple of times, but at other moments, it looked like that he was giving the character Morbius potential of being a very fascinating character. So I don't think the performances were weak in that part. I feel like they were one of the best things in the film. And that's not really saying much because they're not necessarily fantastic, it's just average. Mostly the film occupies a strange no man's land of sprawling Spider-Verse, not charming like the Spider-Man films, not funny like the Venom films, and certainly not technically impressive like the animated Into the Spider-Verse. The entire movie, directed by Daniel, from a script by Matt Sazama and Berg Sharpless, is generic, naggingly, almost jarring, so you watch it and think, this is what now passes for a new Marvel chapter? Missing much of its connective tissue to make sense of the shenanigans, this titular anti-hero is given a vehicle that takes its foot off the gas not far enough into the ride. This movie isn't terrible, Leto is good, the VFX work is slick, and there's modest entertainment to be had here and there, but it seems unlikely to please crowds like Spider-Man No Way Home. I personally don't think that this movie has done much justice to try and see how it could tie into some of the other Spider-Man films and how it could tie into any Spider-Man character. And if it did try to do that, it did really little of it. And personally, I disagree. I do think the VFX are bad. They look terrible, and the color palette is very ugly to look at. It's a really ugly movie to look at. Morbius is unspectacular in ways that waste the potential of what could be an intriguing hybrid of sinister horror and superhero thrills. Morbius is a movie Sony has been trying to make since the early 2000s, and the film being released in 2022 feels like a relic from the early 2000s era of superhero movies, and not in a good way. Morbius, despite the best efforts of its cast, suffers from a number of problems. It's not a Marvel film showing its A game. At its absolute best, it's pedestrian and lacks scope. At its worst, it is unintentionally silly. A second-tier MCU movie with some interesting performances and a few flashes of inspiration that unfortunately never goes deeper than superficial storytelling and grows increasingly tiresome over the relatively brief running time. And that's all of the negative reviews that I am going to be reading. I know, there's probably even more that are on the Rotten Tomatoes website, but they're saying the exact same thing when I read them. So this is the most that I can definitely give you, and I don't really have that much time to go over all of that, so maybe this video is kind of clickbait. Technically, I did try and read all of them, and if there are other reviews that say the exact same thing, then this technically did count. I did actually read all of the reviews. Whatever, the video's ending here. But what did you guys think of Morbius, and what do you think of all of the critics' criticisms? Do you agree with what they're saying or disagree with what they're saying? Or did you have a different take on how you felt about the movie? Put your thoughts down in the comment section below, and let's have a conversation about it. And like this video if you agree with what I say, or dislike this video if you disagree with what I say. I don't mind the dislikes. So that is it I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.